Hello everyone, Ugodre here, and this is my Money Brief. On today's Money Brief, I want to talk about the IMF debt. The IMF debt that Nigeria just repaid has been in the news all week, and I thought it was important to just put some perspective to it. And so, where did this IMF debt come from, and why is Nigeria repaying it? Well, in 2020, just after COVID-19, Nigeria, along with several other countries, had to rely on the IMF for some kind of financial support to get through with what was then an existential global economic threat. If you all recall, oil prices fell below $50, and it was threatening emerging economies and oil-dependent economies like Nigeria. And so for that reason, we went to the IMF and tapped what is called rapid financial instrument from the IMF, which essentially was used to support the economy at that time. This was in 2020, and at that time we did post an article on Nairametrics explaining what that meant. But what is an RFI anyway? So think of it as some kind of right for you to get a loan or for you to borrow from a group of people or from a community. So the RFI in this case was, like the IMF guys would explain, a special drawing right that Nigeria had. So typically, as an IMF member, you do contribute regularly to the IMF's purse. And so based on that, you can also have a special drawing right, which is basically just a piece of paper, like a promissory note that you can then use to tap financing from various IMF partners as well. So it's not as if the IMF essentially would give you $3 billion, $3.4 billion as it was then. But it's a special drawing right which gives you the powers to essentially draw that money. So think of it as Ajo, as a lot of us are probably familiar with, where you contribute money and then every month is maybe someone's turn to draw, and the next month is another person's turn to draw, and on and on and on like that. So you do also have to refund that money, or like a cooperative essentially. So that's basically what this is. This is the simplest way that I can explain it. And so Nigeria took that loan in 2020 and has now repaid it, I think, a quarter earlier, because we were meant to pay back between 3 and 5 years. Now, for clarity, Nigeria has never ever borrowed from the IMF. This is different from the IMF bailouts that we do here. Countries like Ghana or maybe some other sub-Saharan African countries often go to collect, like maybe even Zambia. So this particular loan is an RFI, like I've explained. So it's not your typical IMF loan that you go for when you're really going through a lot of crisis. Surprising that Nigeria did not even go for an IMF loan last year or 2 years ago, when it appears that we had a huge fiscal crisis upon us. We didn't go, even though some of us thought maybe perhaps we probably should have gone, but we did not do that, because IMF loans do come with strict policies that the government needs to start to implement. But it was also surprising too, because we're actually implementing those policies anyways. So why didn't we go to the IMF for some kind of bailout? I guess no government wants to be associated with that, because we've never really gone to the IMF for a loan before, except for this RFI, which, like I said, is not a typical IMF loan. And so Nigeria now paid off that loan. So when did we start paying off this loan? We started paying off this loan, I think, in 2021, 2022, according to the data that we have at Nairametrics. But more aggressively, we started paying this loan in 2023 and 2024. And if I look at my data here, at the end of 2022, this loan had gone from 3.4 billion to 3.2 billion. And then at the end of 2023, the loan had then gone from that 3.2 billion to 2.4 billion dollars at the end of 2024, which is when the current administration came in. And then at the end of 2024, that is after 2023, which is December 2024, the loan had now dropped drastically to $800 million. And so today, now that we're in May, the loans have essentially been cleared May 2025, and now that number has dropped drastically to zero. And so is it a good thing? Yeah, it's a good thing. At least we don't owe that money anymore. And whenever we have or we are faced with any existential crisis, we can always go to the IMF and then tap that special drawing right, which is very different from the typical IMF bailout loans that most countries do take. And that's what I was trying to explain here. But then, what does it mean for Nigeria's general public debt? We still owe. Doesn't mean that Nigeria is not a debtor country. We still owe significant amount of loans. And going by the balances of the Debt Management Office as at December last year, so let's even assume that all the loans we had as at December last year still the same, which of course probably not, but let's just assume we still have about 44.9 trillion dollars, 44.9 billion dollars in external loans that Nigeria still owes, owes the world, and a lot of those loans are Eurobonds. Nigeria's Eurobond debt alone, we estimated about $17.3 billion as at December 2024. We do also own the Chinese Exim Bank, $5 billion. That used to be $4.9 billion. By the way, our Eurobond loans used to be $15.1 billion as at September 2024. And if we go back to 2023, when the current government came in, it was about $15.6 billion. And even if you go back then, the entire portfolio of loans we had as at that time was about $43 or so billion. So in terms of our total external debt, we've added, let's say, roughly $2 billion net in external debt. Now, where we do have significant debt, sizable debt is on the local currency debt. So local currency debt, Nigeria has 74.3 trillion naira in local currency debt, largely due to FGM bonds, which is about 55.4 trillion. But let's remember that that FGM bond number is that huge because of the ways and means, which was the government borrowing from the central bank under the Buhari administration and under Godwin Emefiele as the central bank governor. That amount was over 26 trillion naira or so. And so if you add that number to the current FGN bond at the time, and that takes it to about 55.4 trillion as at December 2024. So probably this is likely higher now because we've been borrowing since then. And if you even go back to 2023, that figure was around 40-something trillion naira. So we actually have been borrowing a lot more over the last 2 years in local currency, not in dollars, of course. Then, of course, we do have other loans as well. We have treasury bills at 12.3 trillion naira in loans. But of significance is actually promissory notes. We've noticed that Nigeria's promissory note debt has also been on the increase, currently at about 1.5 trillion. If you're wondering what are these notes, well, promissory notes are government loans that are due to contractors or people who provide some kind of service to the government. For example, some of the power sector related loans are backed by promissory notes. So government promising to pay that money at some point in time, or to contractors who do one or two supplies or infrastructure project for the government, but the government does not have the money to pay them yet. So they do also give them promissory notes, which is legally backed, of course, by the full faith and credit of the government. And this also forms part of our total public debt. And that number has actually risen over the years. At some point, it was 1.7 trillion in, I think, September 2024, based on the MBS DMO data. As at when this current government came in, by the way, it was about 780 billion naira. At least that's the data that the DMO had. Currently, that number is at 1.5 trillion. It has fallen from the 1.7 trillion high that we had in September to 1.5 trillion. And that is a bit of a challenge, because wonder how the government is going to, government can only fund that through, taxes, more tax receipts, or perhaps through crude oil sales. Now, states as well, states also make up our total domestic debt levels. States at the moment have a total domestic debt level of about 3.9 trillion naira. States are doing pretty well, because it used to be over 5 trillion, if I'm not mistaken. At some point in 2023, states were owing roughly 5.4 trillion naira. And today, that number has dropped drastically to 3.9 trillion. Perhaps one of the reasons why we've seen that number drop is because states now get a lot more FAC allocation, which allows them to pay down some of their loans. And so, in a nutshell, Nigeria as a country, all of us, we do owe 74 trillion naira. Remember, as at December 2024, because it may have changed now. And then in terms of dollar debt or public debt, we owe 44 or so 0.9 $44.9 billion. Important to also note that as much as we've paid the IMF their loans, we do owe the World Bank about $17 billion based on our calculation here. And we also owe the AFDB close to, if not slightly over $3 billion. So there's a lot of loans that we own to multilateral institutions. Aside the IMF, we have paid the IMF, but we still owe the World Bank and we still owe the AFDB. And of course, we also have bilateral loans with countries, most of which is China with about $5 billion. And then we also have France, Japan, India, making up smaller numbers of our total bilateral loans. So that is Nigeria's public debt in a nutshell, and I hope that I have been able to explain it. It's a good thing that IMF loans have been repaid, the RFI loans have been repaid, and we do not want us to go to the IMF to borrow, except we absolutely need to. It's not a stigma, by the way. It just shows that your country is going through very rough times. But as it is currently, it appears Nigeria has a very good debt sustainability level, at least on paper. The challenge has always been Nigeria's ability to service its debt. And going by how some of these debts are also spread, because that's also something that we do track, it appears that they are well spread in a way that those repayments are compatible with our cash flows. And so it's important to, or interesting to see how well these sort of levels we can sustain going forward. Anyways, this has been Money Brief for this episode. Again, I'm Godre, and this is the Nairametrics podcast. I hope that you found this useful. As usual, do have a profitable day ahead. Goodbye. Thank you.